How many of you have learned as much as you can? You've literally studied the whole textbook. You've memorized basically your notes. You've done everything you could to learn a certain topic. When you go on the test, you can't answer anything and you fail. That's what that I could say that's the story of my student life. I could learn as much as I could about a topic, but when it came to the test, I wouldn't know how to answer it. Why? Well, it turns out, and this is from my experience, that you can memorize your whole textbook. You can learn all the notes you want. You can do all the class examples and work out, what your teacher tells you to work out for homework. But if you don't practice what questions are going to come in your exam using past papers, you're going to have a very, very hard time getting the grade you want. I've written this little diagram over here. Now, it doesn't explain so much, but basically the idea is that you have all this knowledge that you learn, right? But in order to know how to translate that knowledge to your IB exam and answer in the way to maximize your marks, that knowledge is kind of useless. And the only way you're going to do that is by practicing a ton of past papers. I'm not talking about doing a little bit of past papers, but practicing a lot of past papers. I'll give you two examples to kind of illustrate the point I'm trying to make. In biology, towards the end of IB, now I'm talking about towards the end of IB, at the end when I studied everything, I covered the whole syllabus. I learned a lot. Like at this point, I was kind of balling in bio. It was at the point where you could ask me a question from the textbook and I could answer you. And also, my teacher was on my side. Like he hated me before, but towards the end, he was like, at this point, he was like, all right, Cole, you can kind of do this. You can get good grades. When I would go and practice past papers, there was this one type of question that I could just never get right. They were called database questions. What the IB exam would give you is they'd give you in a science experiment and they'd ask you these dumb questions with extremely simple, obvious answers that I would always get wrong. I'm not kidding. It would be like a one word simple answer and I'd write down everything else besides that. It was so tough for me, but it was actually really, really simple, but I could just never get it right. So, how did I eventually get over this problem? Well, I basically did a ton of past papers. I did past papers like crazy because all these past papers had the similar style of database questions, right? I just keep on doing them, keep on doing them, keep on doing them. And suddenly, after doing a lot, something just clicked in my head and I started getting them right. I could suddenly get these questions right. I just could not do that before. Here's the crazy thing. If you had come up to me and said, Cole, I can't do these database questions, can you explain them to me? I could not. I don't know why. I don't know what changed, but I could suddenly do them. But I could not explain to you why I could do them. I didn't understand the logic of why I started getting these questions right. I think it's just because I did so many of them, my brain kind of just figured out something clicked and it just worked. The point is that there are certain types of questions in the IB that you need more than knowledge that come out in your exam. You need more than just that syllabus content. You need to know how to answer these questions. What exactly is the style? Like these sometimes questions are a bit tricky to answer. They seem to have one answer, but they could also have another answer. And you could kind of say that that's the IB flair, the IB style of questions. And unless you practice past papers, you're not going to be able to recognize that flair. I'll give you another example. I was never really good at math, but I remember there was this one time we had a test and I prepared like crazy. I did all the end of chapter questions. In your textbook at the end of the chapter, uh, you have all these questions. I did all of them. I worked through the examples in my textbook. I revisited my homework. I did so much practice. When the test came, I flunked. I couldn't do anything. It was like I failed that test. That was one of those tests that I was most confident in, and I came out I almost felt like crying. Why? Turns out that my teacher took past IB questions for that test. I had never encountered past IB questions before. The only questions I kept on doing were those in my textbook and the ones that my teacher would give to me. But even though it was the same chapter, the same content, the IB style questions were just harder. They were just trickier. They just had this weird vibe to them that I couldn't get them in my head when I encountered that for the first time in that class test. And so I kind of failed that test. So I knew all the end of chapter questions. I knew the content. I knew the formulas. I knew the steps. But when you told me to apply into an IB style question, my brain just, I don't know, it just stopped working. Here's the point. You can't say you know a topic until you've done two things. The first and very important part that we all concentrate on is studying the content. But the second important part is you have to do many past paper questions. Because I'll go back to the diagram that I drew in the beginning. Content in itself is not worth it unless you can actually apply it to your tests. Unless you can translate that content and write down answers that the IB wants you to write down, because they usually require you to have a specific diagram, show you're working in a specific way, use specific terms, use specific examples. Unless you know how to translate that knowledge into an answer that the IB wants, that's like matching with the mark scheme, you're not going to get the grades you want. Guys, it is no coincidence that the two subjects I got a 7 in are the two subjects I did the most past papers in. They were economics and biology. Trust me, if you really want to nail your IB grade, you really want to get that 7, you need to do a lot of past papers. You need to do a lot of past papers. That is like, the more you do, it just clicks in your head and you just feel so much more confident. I'm not joking how much past papers help. Now, as to how many past papers you should do or tips on using past papers, how to use them effectively, I have 2 videos on past papers I'm going to link up right now on this video. But here's the point. Every IB student should know about the importance of past papers. We all know about past papers, but some of us only do a couple of them. We just think, all right, they're a bit of practice. No, this is an essential component to your studying. Every IB student should know the importance of past papers. And if you want to get a 7, do a lot of past papers. And I guarantee you're putting yourself in a position to get that 7. All right, if you enjoyed this video, I'm iblikecole. If you're having problems with the IB, feel free to reach out to me. iblikecole@gmail.com, and I'll try to help you out with your problems. All right, have fun.